What if I told you the bread you eat without a second thought has fueled a class war for centuries? Brown bread for the poor, white bread for the rich. But behind this divide lies a battle over nutrition, power, and control, one that's still shaping your diet today. Today, we explore the class war on your plate, brown versus white bread. From medieval banquets to factory mills, from elitist pasta boards to supermarket shelves, how did white bread become a status symbol? How did stripping away grains parts enrich bakeries but impoverish people's diets? And science, what does it reveal when you contrast whole grain with refined? You'll see how history, economics, culture, and health have all collided over a simple slice. At the end, you'll never look at your sandwich the same way. History and class. Brown bread as poor, white as pure. In early societies, most bread was dark, whole grain, coarsely ground. Bran germ, the whole wheat kernel. These were part of the loaf. But flour milling was slow manual. Wealthy households could afford finer milled flour, softer crumb. Poorer folks subsisted on the rough stuff. During the Middle Ages, white bread was literally a luxury. In parts of Europe, laws regulated who could eat what kind of bread. The finest white loaves were reserved for nobility. Coarser brown peasant loaves were everyday bread for commoners. The color of bread marked status. Then came the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. Roller mills, sifters, patented flour processes. These new machines removed bran and germ quickly. White flour could be produced at scale. Suddenly, white bread became cheaper and more available, but still carried prestige. Those who could still choose brown often did so for taste, tradition, or necessity. White bread became associated with cleanliness, modernity, refinement. Brown bread, the smell of the grain, the texture, was rustic, lower class, even ugly in polishing culture. Through advertisements, foods, and social norms, white bread rose. But something was lost. By removing the bran and germ, millers threw away fiber, vitamins, minerals. The same attributes that made brown bread rough were the ones that fed people vital nutrients. The class symbolism grew, even as health took a back seat. What white bread drops? Nutritional science. So what exactly gets stripped when you choose white bread? Whole grain wheat flour retains all parts of the wheat kernel, bran, germ, and endosperm. White, refined flour keeps mainly the endosperm, discarding bran and germ. The USDA data shows whole grain wheat flour has about 10.7 grams of fiber per 100 grams, while white, unenriched wheat bread flour gives only 2.4 grams. That's more than a 4x difference. Micronutrients, also deeply reduced. Compare whole grain as unenriched white. Manganese drops by 142%, magnesium by 120 to 140%, iron by 30 to 40%, B vitamins by large amounts. Fiber isn't just ruvage. It slows digestion, tames blood sugar, feeds gut bacteria. Without fiber, refined bread causes sharper glucose spikes, more insulin response. Whole grain consumption has real, measurable health benefits. A meta-analysis of 25 randomized controlled trials found replacing refined grains with whole grains improved total cholesterol, low-density lipoprotein, LDL, hemoglobin L1C, a marker of blood sugar, and C-reactive protein, a marker of internal inflammation. Another large systematic review across many countries showed that increasing whole grain intake is associated with lower risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, CVD, and all-cause mortality. Every 30 grams of whole grains per day reduced risk for heart disease and death. Brown bread sheds light on what white bread hides: missing nutrients, weaker metabolic resilience, reduced protection against chronic disease. So if whole grain is healthier, why did white bread become the global norm? The answer lies not in science, but in power, privilege, and access. Class, access, and health impacts. White bread became mass-produced. Brown bread often marginalized. Why? Milling technology, but also desire for shelf life, appearance, texture. White bread rises higher, tastes milder, seems cleaner. For many, brown bread meant flavor sacrifice, dense texture, unfamiliar taste. In the early 20th century, deficiency diseases rose among populations eating mostly refined grains, sugar, and little whole grain. Governments responded with flour enrichment policies, making it mandatory for companies to add iron, niacin, thiamine, riboflavin, vitamin B6, etc. back in. These save many from pellagra and other deficiency illnesses. But still, enrichment doesn't restore what aging, fiber, antioxidants, trace minerals, lost in bran and germ, naturally provide. Economic class plays its part today. In many regions, whole grain breads cost more. Supply chains, milling, storage for whole grain are more demanding. Richer households can afford brown bread. Poorer ones stick with white because it's cheaper, more accessible, more familiar. The price tag attaches status. But over time, consumers began to learn the difference. The old stigma faded, and suddenly brown bread, once dismissed as poor man's food, became the premium choice that white bread used to be. The health evidence. Cohorts who eat more refined grains like white bread, pastries, etc. have higher incidence of obesity, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome. Whole grain high intakes correlate with lower blood pressure, better lipid profiles, reduced inflammation. Moreover, refined grain-heavy diets contribute to higher all-cause mortality. In multiple studies, people in highest quintile of whole grain consumption had significantly lower death risk than those who ate mostly refined grains. But people of lower socioeconomic status often have fewer whole grain options. This is class and health interwoven. What you eat is what you can afford, what you've been taught, what your environment supports. Flour enrichment and reforms, but gaps remain. Recognizing the damage of mass-produced white bread, many countries introduced enrichment laws. In the U.S. since the 1940s, enriched white flours must include iron, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin. These prevented many deficiency diseases. Still, enrichment covers only some nutrients. Fiber seldom gets restored. Trace minerals like magnesium, manganese, selenium are often missing. Phytonutrients and antioxidants naturally in bran/germ are usually absent. A piece of enriched white bread might look fortified, but physiologically, it's not the same as brown bread. Reformulated breads, mixes, whole wheat labels. There are improvements. Some mixes include more germ or use whole kernel. But misleading marketing remains. Wheat bread doesn't always mean whole wheat. Whole grain could mean small percent whole grain. Also, diet quality. Even if someone eats a slice of brown bread, if the rest of the diet is heavy white refined grains, sugar, processed foods, risk remains. Health studies show that only when whole grains are part of a balanced diet do benefits really manifest. Many public health guidelines now recommend making at least half the grain intake whole grain. For example, dietary guidelines in US and UK emphasize choose whole grain or high fiber varieties over refined. Many health organizations, including the Mayo Clinic and the Whole Grains Council, recommend that at least half of your grain intake should be whole grains. The US dietary guidelines echo this, suggesting that for everyone aged 9 and up, this means eating 3 to 5 servings or more of whole grains every day. What you can do: change, choice, power. So what can you do in this class war on your plate? Read the label. Look for 100% whole wheat or whole grain as the first ingredient. If bread lists only white flour, enriched flour, or wheat without whole, assume refined. Check fiber content. If a bread slice has 2-3 grams fiber, it's probably mostly refined. Whole grain breads often have 4-7 grams or more per slice. Go for mixes. Whole grain plus refined. If brown bread is unfamiliar, try mixing or half and half blends to adjust taste, texture. Buy from local bakeries, small producers. They often use coarser milling, less bleaching or refining. Support policy and awareness. Ask stores, schools, workplaces to offer whole grain options. Support regulations that require labeling clarity and fortify refined grain less as a replacement to whole grain. Balance your plate. Whole grains, vegetables, legumes. Fill your diet with nutrient-dense foods, so even if you eat some white bread, you cover nutrition elsewhere. Every loaf you choose is a vote, not just for health, but for culture, tradition, fairness. Brown versus white bread. It's more than flavor. It's history. It's status. It's health. White bread became a symbol of wealth, mildness, industrial power. Brown bread wore the label of poverty until research showed what it quietly held: fiber, wisdom, resistance. If this video opened your eyes, hit like, subscribe, share it with someone who loves bread or eats just white. Comment, what kind of bread did you grow up eating? Do you notice whole grain options where you live?